is there's something in my fucking walls that I think they're like squirrels or like some type of rodent, but you'll hear them like scratching around in there, and it's so annoying. So I tried banging on the wall to scare them away. It didn't work. They're still there. So if you hear that in the background, my BZ, my apologies. Do you hear that? God, fucking squirrels. Anyway, moving on. I am absolutely exhausted, but I really wanted to get this video done and hopefully get it posted like later tonight or early tomorrow morning. Tomorrow's Friday, so hopefully I'll get it out by tomorrow sometime. Today I'm going to be reading paranormal stories from Reddit, which I haven't done in a long time. So without further ado, let's get into these. The first one is called The Church and the Days to Come. When I was 17, I worked construction for a small company outside Kansas City. We did multiple jobs all over the city, from restaurants to stores. On this particular job, we got a contract to remodel a church. We went and gave bids, and everything went well, and we ended up securing the job. Below is day by day the experience I went through and how ultimately we forfeited the contract. Day 1, this is the day we arrived and nothing was out of the ordinary. It was a typical Monday, and we unloaded all the tools and took measurements, and just looked around and really admired the beauty of the place. We took all measurements and got lists of materials needed and called it a day. Day 2, we showed up and waited for our materials to be delivered, and while we waited, we got to tearing down some of the old rotten wood and broken flooring. As we were 30 minutes to an hour into this, we heard walking in the back room. We thought it was the delivery guy coming in the back door, but nothing was there, and the door was locked. We didn't think much of it and shrugged it off, and soon enough the materials arrived and we started finishing up removal and called it a day. Day 3, we show up and our supplies are absolutely in disarray. We call the owner and ask if anyone has been there, and he informs us that the church is closed for the week for construction. This kind of freaks us out, but we just slap it all back together and go about work. The entire day, every time we make a noise or move or add anything to the church, we hear a bang behind the pulpit. We investigated like 10 times and never would it repeat nor do anything unless we were actively working on the church. It starts to get dark and we both leave. Did not enjoy that day. Day 4, I'm already not wanting to go, but of course we have to. We show up late, like 2 to 3 p.m. and start going about it, and sure as rain, soon as we begin, it's right back and even louder. Bang, bang. I didn't even want to come to work anymore. We got so annoyed we physically moved the podium to the back of the church. The banging doesn't stop coming from the same place right under where it was. We just try to ignore and keep working. Again, I refuse to stay after dark and we do what we can and leave. On the last day we show up and first thing I clearly see is the podium is back where it started and our supplies were messed up more than last time. At this point I'm completely over the whole job and I clean up our supplies and tell my buddy move the podium again and let's just finish. He moves it and we start working. This time, though, absolutely no banging. Wonderful. This goes on 30 minutes to an hour, and we hear loud running footsteps in the back again. We both go check. Yes, we were scared. And there's absolutely nothing. This happens 5 to 6 times in a few hours span. Finally, we both agree to just leave. We start packing our tools and we hear a terrifying scream from a girl and running in the back again very fast. We ran outside as fast as we could. We left the tools and had the owner leave them outside and we picked them up. Never went in that place again and something is horribly She was 15 years old back in the late 80s or early 90s. One day she walked into our suburban Michigan two-car garage where there was only one car parked. As she turned the corner, there was a small white man about 3.5 feet tall standing there looking directly at her. She froze, not understanding what she was seeing, when it said to her, "Well, hello, young lady," then vanished in front of her eyes. Completely freaked out and still not understanding what happened, she ran to her dad and told him naturally. He checked the garage and there was no evidence of anything out of the ordinary. My dad doesn't believe in anything paranormal, a total unrelenting skeptic. He just admitted that he believed her and that he remembers how incredibly mortified my sister was, and mentioned that her story hadn't changed a bit in the 40 years since then. Had anyone ever heard or seen anything like this before? We are trying to piece together what it could have been. She said the little white man looked similar to a very small Gandalf the White, with long hair parted down the middle, long white beard, and robes. I can hear the family's tone when they say they believe her. They don't. But I'm convinced she's speaking the truth. What do you think? I believe her because a lot of weird shit happens in this world. The next one is called Paranormal Experiences Working at a Funeral Home and Cemetery Combo Location. Like the title suggests, I work in death care at a combo location funeral home, meaning that we have a funeral home, cemetery, and crematory on site. I know people like to debunk stuff on this sub for good reason in a lot of circumstances, so I wanted to see the response to some stories from my coworkers and I. I'll start off with the typical light stuff. One of my coworkers tends to come in very early in the morning to start her work, while I like to stay late. We both spend a good amount of time alone in the funeral home. We both have had experiences of hearing footsteps down the halls, wood floors and long hallways that echo, seeing things out of the corner of our eyes, and hearing faint voices. Not too surprising considering there are an abundance of loved ones in our care at any given time, some having more dramatic passings than others. I will admit, though, that the funeral home itself is pretty tame. There have been many strange occurrences in the cemetery experienced by the grounds crew, cemetery staff, and funeral home staff. One day I was standing by a service early morning and turned and saw a man under a tree not too far away from me. He looked out of place and I saw no cars around besides the few the family drove. I turned to look at him once more, then for a third time, a minute or so later, and he had vanished. This has happened to multiple people. Mind you, we have 17 gardens. I would have seen him walking away or would have seen the car that he was in. A coworker of mine on the cemetery side worked with a man for a while after his wife passed. He wanted a granite pedestal, a stand that holds an urn with customizable toppers, with a bird bath on top. Sounds fancy. For about a year, he would hound my coworker, wanting to know when it would arrive, when that is unfortunately the expected waiting period for custom granite memorials. When it finally arrived, we placed his wife inside and had a service. A few months after, my coworker, who worked with him, woke up from her sleep because she kept hearing "bird bath, bird bath, bird bath" being yelled in her ear. She actually came in the next morning and said he died before we had even received the first call, notification of a death. Lastly, to avoid this being too long, are two stories about our chapel mausoleum. It is the only mausoleum on site with an interior and has large stained glass windows and rows of chairs to sit and visit loved ones or for when services are held inside. This mausoleum is locked every day at 4 p.m. when the grounds team leaves and is unlocked around 6 to 7 a.m. One morning, one of the guys walked into the mausoleum after unlocking it to turn on the lights. He He saw a woman standing in one of the chairs by the windows, facing away from him. He freaked out and walked out to call the superintendent. When he walked back inside, the lady was gone. There is only one entrance to that mausoleum that he was standing right in front of. We hear knocking and shifting noises all the time in the mausoleum. It's so prevalent, I actually address everyone in there when I enter and exit to avoid any bad juju. We had a maintenance crew working on the mausoleum for a while that would come in every morning to find their tools moved all around the room. They would set them on one side of the chapel and come back to them on the other side of the room. One of the workers said he would never come back. While this post isn't very short, this is the shortest I can make it. The cemetery truly is spookier than the funeral home. I would love to hear what y'all think of these stories. The next story is called An Experience That Has Stuck With Me for Years. When me and my best friend were in Boy Scouts, we'd go camping twice a year. Like many Canadians, our group headed up north for this biannual wilderness sabbatical. This campsite was incredibly rural. It was on Algonquin, indigenous land, and surrounded by a dense forest. Whenever night fell, it always creeped me out. It was so dark and silent. On the final day of one of the camping trips, we decided to light up a campfire and make s'mores. My friend, a few of the older scouts, and I were instructed to head into the woods and collect things to fuel the fire. Things like dry tree bark, dead leaves, and whatnot. Once we had collected an ample amount of things off the ground, we got distracted and started digging around. We were running about and throwing pine cones at each other. I managed to duck behind this massive boulder and wait out the ensuing tomfoolery. After a few minutes of silence, I assumed the coast was clear and I could return to the campfire. Right after I got up, I heard rustling on the opposite side of the boulder I was hiding behind. Mind you, this boulder was huge, and it was already somewhat late, so I couldn't tell who or what was on the other side. I heard a raspy imitation of my friend's voice whisper the words, "I see you." Immediately, I thought it was my friend tricking me so he could pelt me with pine cones and other debris. I exclaimed, "I'm not stupid, I know it's you." There was no response. Suddenly, I hear my friend calling my name. I turn and look up to see his silhouette nearby the campfire. He yelled, "Who are you talking to?" In that moment, I realized everyone had left the woods and had returned to the campsite. I was alone. My stomach sank and I bolted back to safety. To this day, I have no idea who or what was speaking to me and lurking on the other side of that boulder. I've told this story and nobody believes me. Recently, me and that same friend were in a Discord call. I was sharing my screen and we were having a nostalgia trip on Google Maps. We were revisiting our elementary school and various other places. I decided to search up our campground only to find out it has been indefinitely closed. I wonder if my experience in the campground's sudden closure are correlated. Who knows? The next story is called Baby Cries. When I was in my first marriage, I used to hear baby cries that don't exist. Ew. Ew, no. The ones that ring in your ear a bit, the ones that sound like "Mom, feed me" cry. I heard baby cries that didn't exist. My daughter was really young at the time, barely 2 years old. It used to drive me insane because no one would believe me. I was married around this time, and my marriage was a very unhappy one. We used to argue all the time, 24/7. Every time we would argue, I would hear the cries, so I would naturally check on my daughter, and every time it was never her. She would always be sleeping peacefully. This was happening so much that I eventually started to think maybe I was going crazy. Well, one day in the middle of an argument between my ex and me, it happened, and to my surprise, he heard the cry. He never heard them before, so something told me stay calm and told him to go check. It was so weird. I just knew it wasn't her. So he goes and checks on her. Boom, nothing. Now he finally believes me. He was so pale. It really scared him, but I was scared for months. Other weird things have happened too. But one once he acknowledged the ghost cries, he stopped calling me crazy. We still fought, but not as much. The cries did stop eventually, but honestly, looking back, I have no idea what that was. That place used to drive me crazy. Ew, that's super gross. I don't like that. Ghost baby cries. No. No. Hell no. The last story of the evening is called It Wasn't My Brother. I'm a bit older now, but there's this memory I have from when I was 7 or 8 that I've never been able to stop thinking back to. I was lying in my bed asleep and swaddled in so many blankets that it was difficult to move. I awoke to an odd feeling that I was being watched. I peeked up and saw a figure staring at me. I couldn't make out its face, but it had the same silhouette and height that my brother did. It was also wearing a striped shirt and jeans that I was sure my brother had. I was staring at where his face would have been and he wasn't speaking. After a few moments of silence, I asked, "Bubba, what are you doing?" He didn't say a word. Close my door. Again, nothing. I closed and rubbed my eyes, and when I looked up, he was gone, and my door was left open. I was sure he did it to mess with me, and I was frustrated, so I got up to confront him. I wriggled out of my nest of blankets and went out into the living room where my parents were. My brother was nowhere in the room, so I asked where he was. My mom told me that he had gone out with friends. I was confused and told them that he was just staring at me in the doorway. My mom told me that no, he wasn't, and he had been gone for hours. I pressed on and said that I just saw him and he was staring at me, not saying anything. She asked what he was wearing, and I told her he had a striped shirt on. She told me that wasn't what he was wearing when he left. I don't even think he owned a striped shirt, actually. We all kind of shrugged it off like, huh, weird. But it was hard for me to fall back asleep. I was very creeped out. My parents were very creeped out. And it was all very confusing. I never got an answer to who or what was staring at me, and I've wondered multiple times if I was just hallucinating or something. Either way, it was a creepy experience. No doubt, no doubt. Those were some creepy ass stories. I hope you guys enjoyed them. I enjoyed reading them for you. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. This helps me out a lot. I appreciate you guys so much. You have no idea. Okay? You just have no idea.